Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Tunguska Event, the biggest explosion in recorded history. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction. Not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. On the morning of June 30, 1908, at approximately 7:17 a.m. local time, something exploded in the sky above a remote region of Siberia near the Podkamennaya Tunguska River. The explosion was heard 1,000 kilometers away. Seismic stations across Eurasia registered the event. Atmospheric pressure waves were recorded around the globe twice. The explosion had the estimated energy of 10 to 15 megatons of TNT, equivalent to approximately 1,000 times the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The Tunguska Event flattened approximately 150 square kilometers of Siberian forest, 80 million trees knocked down in a characteristic butterfly pattern consistent with an aerial explosion. Reindeer and other animals in the vicinity were killed. Eyewitnesses reported a column of fire and a shockwave that knocked people off their feet hundreds of kilometers away. What caused the Tunguska Event remained genuinely mysterious for decades. No crater was found. No meteorite fragments were recovered. The first scientific expedition to the site did not arrive until 1927, 19 years after the event, and the region's remoteness had preserved the evidence in its 1908 state. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the landscape of modern documented mysteries, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Human perception is fallible. This is not an insult, it is neuroscience. The brain does not passively record reality, it actively constructs it, filling gaps with expectation, inferring causes from insufficient data, and storing memories that are reshaped by subsequent experience. Eyewitness testimony is the weakest form of courtroom evidence, precisely because what people see and what actually happened frequently diverge. Sound can cause visual hallucinations. Infrasound at specific frequencies can produce feelings of dread, the sensation of a presence, and even visual disturbances. Sleep deprivation, stress, and hypoxia can generate vivid experiences indistinguishable from waking reality. All of this is relevant when evaluating modern mysteries. Many apparently anomalous experiences have prosaic explanations rooted in human neurology, temporal lobe activity, hypnagogic hallucinations, shared social expectation shaping perception. A willingness to consider these explanations is not dismissiveness, it is intellectual hygiene. The brain is capable of generating extraordinarily convincing experiences that have no external cause, and yet the perceptual explanation has its limits. It cannot account for physical evidence, radiation burns, landing traces, electromagnetic interference on electronic equipment, or anomalous readings on calibrated instruments. When multiple independent witnesses, separated by distance, report identical details, mass hallucination strains credulity. When physical measurements corroborate subjective experience, the neurological explanation is insufficient. These are the cases that demand another look. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Tunguska event, the biggest explosion in recorded history, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The energy released by the Tunguska event has been estimated at 10 to 15 megatons of TNT equivalent based on seismic records and atmospheric pressure wave data. This makes it the largest impact or explosion event in recorded human history, larger than any nuclear weapon ever tested, though smaller than some theorized historical cosmic impacts. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the first scientific expedition to the Tunguska site, led by Leonid Kulik in 1927, found a region of approximately 2,000 square kilometers of flattened forest in a distinctive radial pattern pointing away from a central point, consistent with an aerial explosion rather than a ground impact. No crater was found despite extensive searching. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. The absence of a crater initially led to speculation about exotic causes, including antimatter annihilation, black hole passage through the Earth, a Tesla weapon test, and alien spacecraft. None of these explanations is consistent with the available physical evidence. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the scientific consensus, developed through decades of research, is that the Tunguska event was caused by the airburst of a small asteroid or comet approximately 50 to 80 meters in diameter. T entered the atmosphere at high velocity and exploded at an altitude of approximately 5 to 10 kilometers. An airburst of this kind would produce the observed effects without leaving a crater. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of a 2013 study published in Nature using data from the Chelyabinsk meteor airburst of the same year provided new constraints on Tunguska's characteristics. The Chelyabinsk event, approximately 20 meters in diameter and only 0.5 megatons, injured over 1,000 people from shockwave effects. Tunguska was enormously larger. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: Lake Chico, located approximately 8 kilometers from the Tunguska explosion's epicenter, was proposed in 2007 as a possible impact crater from a fragment of the Tunguska object. However, subsequent sediment core dating found the lake predates 1908, and the proposal is no longer accepted by most researchers. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. Equally puzzling to investigators, Eyewitness accounts from the Evenki people and Russian settlers in the region describe the event in vivid detail. A column of bluish fire, an explosion so loud it was heard 1,000 kilometers away, a shockwave that shattered windows and knocked people off their feet, and a black cloud that turned day to night. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Tunguska event, the biggest explosion in recorded history. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the Tunguska event was caused by the airburst of a stony asteroid approximately 50 to 80 meters in diameter that entered the atmosphere at a shallow angle and fragmented explosively at an altitude of 5 to 10 kilometers. This is the scientific consensus, consistent with all available evidence and with the behavior observed in smaller airbursts, including Chelyabinsk in 2013. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the Tunguska event was caused by a small cometary nucleus composed primarily of ice and volatile material that vaporized completely in the atmosphere, explaining the absence of recovered meteorite fragments. The comet hypothesis was favored for decades before improvements in asteroid modeling made the stony asteroid explanation more compelling. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the Tunguska event represents a category of cosmic threat, airbursts of small objects that are too small to track but large enough to cause catastrophic regional damage. That deserves far more attention from planetary defense programs than it currently receives. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Tunguska event, the biggest explosion in recorded history, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes the radial pattern of fallen trees, centered on the aerial explosion point at approximately 60 degrees 55, 101 degrees 57, air, is consistent with a pressure wave from an aerial explosion. Ion and rules out a simple ground impact. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented microscopic silicate spherules and elevated iridium in the Tunguska soil layer are chemical signatures consistent with extraterrestrial material, confirming a cosmic rather than volcanic or industrial origin. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed seismic recordings from stations across Europe and Asia, combined with atmospheric pressure records, allow reconstruction of the event's energy and timing to within reasonable bounds. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Tunguska event, the biggest explosion in recorded history. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Tunguska event is now considered a high-priority case study in planetary defense. The Chelyabinsk event of 2013, far smaller but also an airburst, demonstrated that small objects can cause significant casualties without impact warnings. NASA and other space agencies have intensified tracking of near-Earth objects in the 50-200 meter size range, specifically because of what Tunguska demonstrated, that a civilization-disrupting explosion is possible from an object that could arrive with little or no warning. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Tunguska event, the biggest explosion in recorded history, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Tunguska ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process, and the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.